You're listening to Seek Travel Ride, a podcast which shares the stories of people taking bike adventures all over the world, and I'm proudly supported by Red White Apparel. They're a small independent brand, and for the last 10 years they focus wholly and solely on making the most comfortable bib shorts on the market. I've been using their bib shorts on my long rides lately, and they're a total game changer. Support the brands that support this podcast. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more about Red White Apparel. Now, on to the episode.
I didn't really think about the natural hazards that America offers. And one of the things I didn't think about was twisters. I mean, I've seen Twister. I've seen whatever Twister 2 was. You know, I'm aware of the existence of twisters. It just didn't really ever occur to me that this could be in the same environment. And then I was in the Midwest, and a couple of people said to me, well, it's been a really wild twister season already this year. And I just thought, hang on, I've got no idea what to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so I asked someone in Columbus, and they said, oh, I think that you're meant to get into a ditch. Don't go in a sort of a bridge or a tunnel. But there aren't that many ditches. There's some drainage ditches by the side of the road, but there aren't that many. You know, it's very flat.
Welcome to Seek Travel Ride, where we share the stories and experiences of people taking amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello listeners, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and today's episode is actually coming to you in the form of a recipe. To start with, you need one accomplished food writer known for her brilliant food testing and insightful cookbooks, and that'll be our guest for today, Felicity Cloake. Then we need to add in a generous serving of passionate travel, individually stir in 3 separate bike tours across France, the UK and the US, then combine them all to form an international flavoured cycle tour. Simmer in some engaging slow travel stories, add a pinch of humour, and then by the end of the episode, voila, you'll have enjoyed a bike travel feast fit for a Michelin star restaurant. Okay, recipe humour aside, it should go without saying that I am super excited to be joined by Felicity Cloake today. She's an award-winning food writer, author of multiple cookbooks, and is the brains behind How to Make Perfect, The Guardian's weekly food column. But did you also know Felicity is a fan of cycle touring as well, and has perfectly combined her passion for discovering regional food with that of exploring places on a bicycle? Her journeys have taken her around France, all over the UK, and most recently, her longest cycle tour to date from coast to coast across the USA. Felicity has also summed up her experiences on each of these tours in 3 separate books, all of them written with a unique perspective and a good dose of British humour as well, sharing the joys as well as the challenges of bike travel that's taken with the purpose of discovering the best local cuisine from the region she's travelling through. Listeners, if her books are anything to go by, I am 1,000,000% certain we are in for an absolutely great time as Felicity shares her experiences with us all today. Felicity Cloake, welcome to the show.
So great to be here. I don't know if I can live up to Michelin star restaurant, but something rustic and hearty I am here for. Let's go with that.
Rustic and hearty food's the best though. I always think, actually, you might agree with me, I always think the best food isn't the food that gets the most well presented on a plate.
Definitely. I enjoy, don't get me wrong, I enjoy sort of very elegant, sophisticated food, but my favourite, especially when you're cycle touring, is just something that you happen upon that is generous in flavour, in quantity, in the person serving it. You feel like you've got a real taste of where you are. It's just it really doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be copious.
Oh, there's never enough food. And I can talk food for ages. And listeners, we will be talking food a lot. But Felicity, I've got so many questions for you. But the first question I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is Felicity Cloake, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I do. So to set the scene, I am what is kindly known as a surprise, or potentially as a mistake, depending on how many glasses of wine my parents have had. So I have a sister who's 10 years older and a brother who's 7 years older. And so my bikes all came from the 70s. And my first bike was a little red, like, I suppose, small girl's bike. I guess it would have been designed for in those days, those more gendered days. and it had a little white basket on the front. And my main memory of it was that my brother was told to take me to the shops to get something, and we went down a massive hill, felt massive at the time, and I did what most small children do and put my foot out to try and brake and knocked out my 2 front teeth. So
Oh, fun, bottom or top?
my main memory is that my brother still made us go to the shop before taking me home.
Well played. Were you buying sweets or something?
I'd probably, knowing him. So I still hold that against him all these years later. But luckily they're baby teeth, so it wasn't too disastrous.
I was going to say that you've recovered well. I can see you now, and listen, you're not gappy at all.
No, that does remain my biggest bike accident to date, even though I feel very nervous saying that because
Oh,
presumably
that's me
exactly.
knocking on wood, right?
Yes, anyway, hopefully by the time you hear this, it will still be my biggest bike accident.
Okay, misadventures as a tiny little kid aside, what about growing up then? Were you, I know you live in London now, but were you in a sort of suburban area growing up? Or were you more out in the countryside? Like, were you out in the outdoors much exploring?
We were. So I grew up in Hertfordshire, which is sort of just north of London. So it wasn't incredibly rural, but we were out a lot. But my parents are really big on walking. So we did a lot of walking and not so much cycling. And it wasn't until, and then I was at boarding school and we didn't do a lot of cycling there. But it wasn't when I got to university, I realized that actually a bike could be something that could mean that you weren't late for lectures, or you could, go cycling around town after a couple of drinks, which obviously is not something I would advise now, but something we did quite a lot in those days. And the joy of cycling, I think that's the point where it occurred to me that it could be fun. And then when I moved to London after university, I just, remember cycling home again, probably from the pub, and just thinking, this is fun. This is such a sense of freedom. And that's not something that I think I realized until I was an adult. And then it wasn't until probably 10 years later that I realized how fun it could be when you weren't just going from A to B, where you were cycling for the pleasure of it. And that just opened so many doors to me. So yeah, it wasn't a childhood thing for me. I could ride a bike. I remember being taught to ride a bike by my dad, but I didn't fall in love with it really until much later.
Travel by a bike then, because there's one thing to zoom around the city or feel that freedom of being able to break free a little bit, but actually taking like touring with a bike, how did that come to be?
So it was 2014, I think, and I'd just been dumped. So I was feeling quite miserable. And a friend of mine said that she was taking a group, they were cycling to Brussels and from London to Brussels. And did I want to join? And initially I was like, no, doesn't sound fun. And then I was like, why not? Like, jump out of your comfort zone. You've got nothing to lose. You're only sitting at home weeping anyway. So why not? So, I bought a new bike. And that was the first day. Before that, I had a Pashley bike, which is one of those sort of old fashioned,
Step through?
very heavy, step through bike, big wicker basket, very beautiful, but actually quite impractical if you need to go up a hill or get any parts replaced. It turns out I wouldn't say that Pashley's customer service was the best. They do look great on Instagram. Anyway, I won't go into that side rant, but anyway, so I bought a Cannondale, but quite an entry level Cannondale, and it transformed my experience of cycling. But also I loved, oh my god, the trip, just cycling through, even though that bit of northern France going into Belgium, the scenery is not the most exciting, I have to say. I mean, it can be beautiful, but it doesn't have a lot of hills. There are a couple of, I can't remember what they're called now, but there's a couple of sort of small hills that we weren't expecting, and we were still talking about it now, like, oh my God, where did they come from? But then I remember after that stopping for a cream cake in a boulangerie and etc. And in Belgian villages, the friet van, and it was just fun and being tired at the end of the day. And I don't know, I realized that I love this. I love this as a way of travel. I love this as a holiday. I love the opportunity to eat a lot and just to feel that you've had a really good day exploring and like pushing yourself and seeing things. It just felt very wholesome, also with a lot of beer, but very wholesome. And I fell in love from there. And then I did a couple more after that, in like short trips in Tuscany and Brittany. But then the real epiphany came when in 2018, a friend of mine, quite a a girl that I'd worked with decided that she would move. So she is half, she very carefully says she's not English, she's half Scottish, half Provençal. And her family all have a small holding near Mont Ventoux in France. And she decided that she was going to leave her job in publishing and she was going to move to Provence and write a cookbook. And for some reason, not quite, still unexplained, she decided that she was going to cycle there. Now, she did not own a bike in London. She assembled this disparate group of women, most of whom did not own a bike. I think only I and one other girl could fix a puncture. I met them all at Portsmouth to get the ferry, and we cycled from Saint Malo down to the coast at Sète, the Mediterranean coast. And it was incredible. We did the Velo d'Essai route, which is along the canal, and then as far as Bordeaux, and then we took, I can't remember what the other canal is called.
Canal de Meuse, like the
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, I don't love those canal routes because I like being in villages and seeing what's going on. I'm very nosy. I also don't like to miss a boulangerie or similar.
You have to divert off the canals to hit those up.
Yeah, exactly. But it was very beautiful. But that gave me the idea that could there be a book in this? Like, is there a way that I can make this wonderful holiday into part of my work? Could I be paid a very small amount to go cycle touring? And that was the thing that lit the flame. And I came back and I said to my agent, because I'd done a few cookbooks by then, because I was already a food writer. And I said, I don't want to write another cookbook. I want to write a foodie travel book, and I want to do it by bike. And to her eternal credit, she said, I think that sounds great. Let's do it. And my publisher at the time didn't want to know. Lots of different publishers didn't want to know. But the one publisher that said, yes, I don't want another cookbook from you, I want this, we went with. And they have been great. And I've now done 3 books with them.
And that first book, One More Croissant for the Road, I love it. It sings to me on many levels because I think I can relate to it so much. And maybe it's, I think you and I both share that equal passion for, slow travel on a bike, discovering places, going to the little villages and finding the boulangeries. And in my experience, actually, Felicity, the boulangeries that look the most unappealing are actually the ones that have seemed to have dished out the best food. That aside, but also the idea of basing it around food. Oh my gosh, I love it. In fact, you and I both have a croissant rating system, and it's different.
Oh, I'm interested to hear about yours.
Yeah, well, actually, we should first tell the listeners about yours, because all through the book, you pretty much rated every croissant that you had, and you had developed a croissant rating system as well. Butteriness was one of your ratings.
So this started actually when I did the initial 2018 trip, because we were always camping because we were on such a small budget. And so it was just like each morning started with trying to find a boulangerie just to have a croissant, potentially 2 croissants, and like a noisette or some sort of small coffee affair. And you would just eat it on the saddle of your bike, and then get going for the day. And it just like, I have to admit, I'd just never been that into croissants before. Like, it didn't really sing to me. I'm a very savoury breakfast person. The croissant, while not actively sweet, is more sweet than savoury. And I started to realise, because it was so plain, there was nothing with it, we were not having the butter, the jam, whatever, I started to really appreciate what a wonderful thing a plain croissant is. And to this day, I'm not interested in your matcha croissant. I'm not interested in your cronut or anything like that. No, I just want a plain croissant au beurre. And so I started to think, that really interested me, because I'm a food nerd. I wanted to think about what the differences were, what I enjoyed. I wanted to see if I could tell by eye what a good croissant was going to be. And so I started rating them. And visual appeal is a small factor, but for me, it's mostly, I'd say it's almost more texture than flavor. I like it to have a buttery flavor. I like it not to be too sweet. What's interesting is that French butter and British butter have such different flavors, and both of them are good, but I can always tell a croissant that's been made with French butter because it is sweeter naturally than one that's been made with British butter. And I like them to be it's not technically correct. I did judge the first British iteration of the Isigny Croissant, Concours de Croissant, that they do in France every year. They had their first one last year, and I was a judge, and I was up against, various really quite senior French bakers and etc. Not up against, but I was judging with them, and I was so pleased when my results almost exactly tallied with theirs, because I think
because you're an expert. Come on.
know that the croissant that I like is not technically correct, as they would say. I like it to have quite a slightly undercooked center, so it's a
Yes.
little bit squidgy in the middle and then super crispy on the bottom, like almost like some of the butter has leaked out, which would not be correct, and it's slightly sort of fried in its own butter beneath. Like,
Oh, no, you speak to myself. See, my rating system is these are not necessarily properly English words. I rate it on butteriness, flakiness, freshness, as in like if I've got it and it's literally come out of it. I've managed to magic myself to be at the boulangerie like 10 minutes after the croissants are ready. That's amazing. And then the other one is like translucentness. So the bag turn,
oh,
yeah, because that's a hint to the butteriness as well. Because if the bag is translucent,
oh,
I
yeah,
know, oh my gosh, this is going to be mega and it's fresh. But I know what you mean by the soft, sort of stodgy or squishy sort of center, because
exactly.
some of the some of the croissants which are lower down in my rating system, it's not that they're badly made, and in fact, you know, you bite it and you can see all the lovely layers, but they're almost dry and almost they're not like a cake because they don't taste like cake. But there's something that's not hitting
Yeah,
all the high notes for me. I could
they're
see why
more,
the French would dip that one in a coffee. Let's put it that way.
yeah.
Not that I
Oh,
do
it's
that
good.
either, but my lovely neighbour does.
My Carolyn, the girl that moved to Provence, she did that and horrified me. So you're a bet. But yes, interestingly, so when I did the croissant, I'm aware we're getting off bike touring, but when I did the croissant judging, they would cut the croissant in half across the center, which seemed to be violence, just to see that all the layers were separate. And I said, but I don't want them to be separate.
Yeah.
So yes, I don't think you should take a knife to a croissant. That feels wrong to me.
Anyway, I could change this episode to just being food with a sprinkling of bike touring. But listeners, I promise we're going to talk some bike travel in here as well. But that first trip then, I could understand having the previous experience of traveling through France, and you know, every bike traveler understands this, you get really hungry traveling on a bike too. And it's almost, for me, it's almost like this insatiable appetite. I don't know if you can relate, but if I've done some bigger tour, like, you know, a big effort for not just a weekend, but away traveling for a while, I find that I can't satiate that hunger even for like a week or so after I've finished. I don't know. Are you the same? Like, and I don't even know if that's a thing or if it's a mental thing.
I what I found was very much on all of my trips when I came back, it wasn't so much that I was permanently hungry. I just really wanted to eat like salads and spicy flavors, like strong spicy flavors. Because having been around France, amazing food. UK, great food often if you know where to look, but I just wanted things like just wanted some like Thai flavors. I wanted some lime juice, I wanted some chili, I wanted some salad. And obviously the same in the States. So I came back and I was like, okay, I want a cup of tea. Number one thing, I had a really good cup of tea. Actually, I went for a Sunday roast, but one with loads of vegetables. It's like, yes, this is a dream.
Listeners, one of the best things about being an independent podcaster is I get to choose the companies which I collaborate with, and I'm all about promoting brands which I actually use. Red White Apparel is one of them. Over the years, I have tried to go chamois-free on my bike adventures and ditch the bib shorts, but every time I have been filled with regret and a lot of discomfort. That means I need solid bib shorts, and Red White have got it right. After 10 years of making nothing else but bib shorts, they have nailed comfort and functionality, including a version which I'm using which makes pee breaks way easier. As a woman, a pee break friendly bib is an absolute non-negotiable. Supporting Red White helps support this podcast, so please head to the link which I've put in the podcast show notes and see what they're all about. Okay, now back to the episode. It is, because actually I know this feeling, like especially if I'm bike touring with camping, like every meal nearly becomes camp pasta, but I always try and incorporate vegetables in where I can.
I actually once, when I was waiting, because I had to link some parts on my French tour with trains just because I did not have enough time to do it all by bike. And I ended up eating a carrot râpé from a relay in a train station in Brittany that had actually started fermenting. And I was just like, I don't care. This is fizzy, but I just really need need some fresh vegetables. It didn't do me any harm. Maybe made me slightly drunk.
Taking trains with a bike, though, on your bike tour, I've done it before, and it's great for the opportunities it's presented me to, whether it's because of weather or whether because I need to skip ahead for some reason. But it never not without its stresses. Even when it seems to run perfectly, I equate it to, and maybe you can, if I have to catch a flight, right? I don't know why, but when I'm at customs, I always get stressed, even though I'm not a criminal. And I feel the same stress when I'm about to board about a train with my bike. Even if I book the bike spot, it's all just still stressful for me. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. Just because you're never quite sure, different countries still have different regulations. Different train services in the UK have different regulation. Even in France, the different tiers of, the TGV and the RER and etc. There are different rules. And you can never guarantee that someone hasn't taken your bike space, even though you booked it, and you're going to have to passive aggressive sort of bike off with them, or that it won't fall over or someone won't steal it. It's just, do you take your panniers off? It is a real stress. I did fall down I fell down the stairs at, I can't remember it might have been Limoges railway station with a fully laden bike because I was walking in cleats, and it was beautiful railway station with like marble floors, and I was in such a hurry. And oddly enough, the guy that picked me up, I was just, he very kindly came to pick me up. He was a, SNCF staff. And when he heard my accent, he switched and he had this broad Birmingham, UK accent. It was very unexpected, and actually in that moment really welcome. I was like, yes, I don't have to speak French to you.
It's just become mentally easier. Oh, my funniest moment with my bike at a train station, I'm trying to remember, I think it was at Bordeaux. I don't think it was at Nantes. I'm pretty sure it was at Bordeaux station. And of course, even though there was like a lift that you could use to descend the platform, it was not in operation. And I was there with like heavily laden bike, and the conductor just saw me and my face, the look of how am I going to get this down the stairs, and his wish to me was bon chance, madame, or no, it might have been bon courage, madame. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Because my husband was a little bit ahead, and he had nearly gone head over the bars trying to wheel it, because I think it was one of those ones, where they have got like the little slidey metal thing that your tires apparently can go in, and you can don't even try that, people. I'm just putting my take it from me.
Especially not with panniers. Yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah.
So I want to know, because obviously you've done 3 food journeys now, or bike tours around food. France was one. You did one through the UK, which was all about discovering the great English breakfast. I love this.
British breakfast, I have to.
Oh, yes, great British breakfast.
In fact, I did it wider, although it's not so alliteratively pleasing. It was the great UK breakfast. So I went across the Northern Ireland for the Ulster fry.
Oh, yum.
As well.
Black and white pudding and a bit of potato bread. Soda files?
Yeah, that's what I love about the Ulster fry, that you've got the potato bread, the soda files, and then you might have some brown bread on the side as well. It's all of the carbs, which I am very much here for.
Oh, me too. My husband's family is from Northern Ireland, and he definitely introduced me to that. But you did that as well, and then you've taken your latest tour across the US, and that is all food-based, and that was from the West Coast to the East Coast. Huge tour, by the way.
Yeah.
When people plan bike tours, there's different things that people think about in the planning phase. Like some people want to see a particular landscape. Some people want to challenge themselves on particular terrain. Some people simply just want to get from this place to that place. I wonder, I've got 2 questions. One, when you plan it, is it all based on food? Regions that you want to go to and dishes that you want to try in the actual original local area it's from? And 2, how has the way that you've planned your trips changed from that first trip through France to how you just did your trip just recently through the US?
Oh, that's a good question. So first off, I do plan them with food in mind because that's what I'm writing about. But I also like to have a variety. So for the US, for example, I really wanted to feel like I wasn't just going from east to west, because it's such a ridiculously vast country, which I knew, but I don't think I did know until I got there. And I've been to the States loads of times, but I just had never fully comprehended how huge, how diverse, how unlikely it is that it's held together. As several people said to me along the way, they said it's too big for one country, and I'm slightly inclined to agree. And so I knew that I wanted to see some of the West Coast. I wanted to see some of the South, some of the Southwest. And also I was really keen to see the Midwest, because I feel like, that faintly derogatory term, the flyover states, that kind of thing really interests me. That idea of almost the most American bit of America.
Small town America.
Yeah, that kind of slightly overlooked, disparaged. I thought, I bet they've got some good food. I feel like I'm going to meet some interesting people there. And also, I was quite eager. One of the things that obviously I haven't had on my bike tours in Europe is this idea of endless space. You're never, even if you're cycling through, I mean, I had a dark night of the soul cycling from Wisbech to Cambridge in the UK because it was so flat. And I realized that actually that's much worse than hills, because your bum gets really sore when you're in one position the whole time.
Speaking of the converted here, I am with you 100%, sister. No.
Yeah, so I was worried. I was kind of worried about my posterior, but I was also mentally worried. I was like, what am I going to do if there's nothing to see but a grain silo 40 miles on the horizon? It's going to be so tough. And actually, I realized that, in common with many landscapes, when you take the time to look, they're never that empty. There's always signs, there's things to look at. There's always interest if you look for it. But I was very keen to do that. And then I was desperate to go to New England and up near. I'm very much a creature of the North. And so I really wanted to go up near the Canadian border. And I knew I was going to finish in New York, because on the 4th of July in New York, at Coney Island, they have a hot dog eating competition. And I thought, this is the most American thing I can conceive of. And so that's the first thing I planned, was the hot dog eating competition. And I kind of worked backwards from there. So it was just a question of what made sense as a route, hitting some obvious places like New Orleans, and to maybe less obvious places like Columbus, Ohio, I discovered is kind of the spiritual home of the hamburger. And I wanted to do stuff like talk about Chinese American food, Mexican American food, just all of the amazing things that make America so much more than just its big multinational chains. It's such a fascinating food country. And I wanted to get a real slice of that, to just go beyond the cliches, basically, which I hope I've done.
When I think of that type of food, I'm thinking of like diners and stuff as well. Like, to me, that would be a quintessential American food experience if I was out there. Like, if I wanted to be somewhere in the flyover state, as you called it, I'd want to be sat at a diner.
Yeah.
I'm almost picturing like the diner from Twin Peaks. Like that's the type of experience, finishing the meal off with a slice of cherry pie or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, cherry pie. There was one place in, I think it was in Indiana, where they brought out the waitress brought out a tray of pie. Mind you, I was still eating my main course. That was the thing that I did not get used to there. That you don't linger over a meal in an American diner. Yeah, she brought out a tray, and there must have been 12 or 13 slices of different pie on the tray. And then she said, and I said, well, what are they? And so she went through them all. And then she said, and there's some more in the chiller, but you'll need to go and look at those. And I'm thinking, who needs these many types of pie? But it was when there's one of those classic chrome old railway car diners. But one of the things that I found interesting is a lot of those diners are run by, say, Greeks. It's very common, particularly in the East
Oh,
Coast.
wow.
They'll have all the standards, and then there'll often be something on the menu that you're like, oh, okay, that's where you're from. It's just like Greeks and Macedonians on the East Coast.
Are you like randomly finding things like moussaka on the menu or something
Yeah,
like that?
exactly. And that's what I found so fascinating, that things are never just American. And also, one of the sadnesses on the trip, I really wanted to go to Minnesota, because there is a restaurant there that is, I think is it Michelin starred, but it's certainly on the Michelin list, and it's been voted to the best new restaurant in America. And it is a Native American chef who uses only Native American ingredients. So no wheat, no dairy, because Native Americans didn't consume dairy before they were colonized, and etc. But that is the bit that I found difficult, because I really wanted to look at Native American food culture, and it was quite difficult to find. But apart from that, one of the very interesting things is that things are never just American outside the Native American sphere. They're always sort of Greek American, Scottish American, Chinese American, Cambodian American. It's just fascinating. But they're never entirely, Cambodian either. They've always got a twist. It's just, I love things like that. In the South, they have a new tradition of Vietnamese crawfish boils. So they take in the southern crawfish boils, and all of the Vietnamese that fled in the 1970s, a lot of them landed up in Houston area, and they do crawfish boils with sort of Vietnamese spices, and it's just, they're incredible. What a great mashup of traditions.
Listeners, if you're planning a bike tour, a holiday, or maybe even heading to an event on the other side of the country and you want to avoid the hassles of flying with your bike, then Bike Flights is a service well worth looking into. They specialise in bike shipping and making it easy to send your bike safely door to door, especially for international travel when, let's face it, flying with a box bike is stressful and can often feel like too much. There's a link in the show notes if you want to learn more, and if you do book through that link, it also helps support me and the podcast out at no extra cost to you. Okay, now back to the episode. It's funny, when I think of American food and different cuisines, I think of Mexican food. I imagine you would have had some great Mexican food there as well.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. And that was something that I knew I was very excited about. I didn't know about the Vietnamese crawfish boils when I went. I didn't know about the sort of the Cambodian Czech dumplings I was going to find in Texas or any of that, but I knew that I was going to get great Mexican food. And I also wanted to look at, most interesting to me is the Tex-Mex phenomenon, because I don't know about in Australia, but in recent years in the UK, people have been very snotty about Tex-Mex and said, oh, it's not proper, it's not authentic Mexican food. But what's weird about that is that's coming from a place of not knowing, of ignorance, not knowing that actually Texas was part of Mexico long before it was part of the US. And a lot of the Tejanos that live in Texas and in that border region, they have been there for a lot longer than the Anglo people dismissing their food as inauthentic. And it's a lot of the kind of the cucina povera, as they would call it in Italy, of necessity, because they were quite poor. They would replace what originally in their cuisine with, they'd sort of bulk it out with, say, the rice in a burrito or something. That's a bulking element because it's cheaper than meat. I found that absolutely fascinating. And talking to people there was a great woman in San Antonio, a chef called Jennifer Hua Dobertin, who's actually gave me a recipe for my book. And she is of, I think, Taiwanese. I think her parents are both from Taiwan, or one of her parents, maybe her mother is from Taiwan. But she grew up in Texas, and she grew up eating a lot of Mexican food. And so she does these amazing sort of mashups of Taiwanese, Mexican, Texan food. And it's so exciting as a greedy person to go and eat a Chinese dumpling that is stuffed with Texan breakfast taco ingredients. It's just, your mind is blown. Wherever I went in the States, if you looked at a Mexican grocery, then you could get great fresh vegetables. I mean, they were always in a size that suggested you had a family of like 25. And I was like, I'm just one person cycle touring. But, you could get fresh vegetables, and you could get great freshly fried tortilla chips and etc. And the food was really good. And there was always like a Mexican food trunk that was serving people. Even when I was in the Hamptons, which was so expensive, I found a
Is it
little
like the
Mexican.
American version of Norway or Switzerland?
It was like the American version of Antibes, incredibly expensive, incredibly exclusive. It was not somewhere that I saw anyone else cycling.
I want to go back though. All these ideas of different food you wanted to try. So I'm guessing your tour routes really are based on food you want to eat, as opposed to just that classic. Like obviously crossing America, you said you didn't want to go over and you didn't want to skip the bits that most people want to skip because you think there's interest there.
Yeah.
But you still are looking to go to certain areas to seek out stuff you've heard about as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I knew that you can't really write about American food without writing about, say, New Orleans. You really need to, I felt, hit LA, and LA worried me because if I think of a city that doesn't seem cycling friendly, then I would think of LA. I think that stressed me out, but I felt like I had to go there. But it was interesting. I spent a lot of time on cycling forums and actually listening to previous episodes of your podcast, trying to find out which direction to go in, because I know that people have very fixed ideas about the prevailing wind and etc. when you're going across the country. And even though I wasn't going across the country in a straight direct way I was going from east to west or west to east. So I needed to decide about that. And actually, it was through research and listening to a few people that I decided that an initial plan I had, that I was going to cycle from DC to Kentucky, because I wanted to go, I wanted to be in DC because I wanted to write about Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's country house, which is in Virginia. And he is always like America's founding foodie. And he's claimed, although this is not true, to invent ice cream and macaroni cheese and all of these things. So I felt like I should go there. And I wanted to go to Kentucky because, of course, I wanted to write about fried chicken. And I felt like there's a Colonel Sanders Museum in, I think it's London, Kentucky, or New London, Kentucky. Anyway, it's in rural Kentucky. And I was looking at this, and I was route planning, and I was doing my sort of Google Street View to try and work out the roads and etc. And then I read, and I think I went on a Reddit forum and asked, and I read, and I listened to so many people telling me that actually the Appalachians are a difficult place to cycle. Even though the climbs aren't huge, they're relentless, they're very steep, and it's not necessarily set up for cycle touring, and it's quite poor, and there's a lot of feral dogs.
The dog. When you said Kentucky, the first thing I thought of was dogs, because every guest I've interviewed has talked about the
Exactly.
dogs in Kentucky.
Exactly. And I just thought, oh, you know what? I don't know if I'm up for this. Because I was the difference between the US and my trips to France and around my home country is that I was nervous. I was like really nervous doing it because so many people said to me, people don't cycle in America for a reason. It will be a disaster. It's not, in France, it's all set up. In the UK, people are well used to seeing cycle tourers. I was nervous. I honestly didn't know whether I was going to end up beneath a huge truck on day one. And so being put off by the idea of feral dogs and potentially people throwing stones at me, which I'm sure wouldn't have happened. But when I was here in the UK, I just didn't know how much to believe about what you read online. And so I changed my entire route and planning for that. So there was a little bit of consideration of sort of terrain and landscape in there as well, but it was mostly I wanted to hit various places for food. And I did plan it a lot more than either of my previous trips, just because the scale of America is such that you have to, and I couldn't take any internal flights because I had the bike. I couldn't take a Greyhound bus because you've got to have a bike box. And so I needed to be quite strategic with trains and etc.
What are the trains like in America for bike travel?
Well, they were better than I thought. And actually, quite a few people that I met in America said they'd never taken the train outside the East Coast. A lot of people just don't take the train. There's a couple of reasons for that, which I didn't appreciate initially, because I had a great time. The first train that we took was had a friend with me at that point who did refuse to cycle on this, but he said he'd meet me in LA and he wanted to see Texas. And so we took a train from Los Angeles to San Antonio, but that train goes all the way through to New Orleans. And so it's like a 4-day train trip, and it goes through the southwestern desert. It's astonishingly beautiful. And I was thinking, this is, we got a little roomette sleeper car. The food was pretty good, given it was train food. It was all served. They had wine, which obviously I was delighted by. And I didn't know what they were complaining about. And then I went coach class for all my other trips on my own. I was like, okay, these trains are
Grim?
they weren't grim, but there was a high proportion of people that you might get. I had a woman, I went from Chicago to DC, which is a trip. It's definitely an overnight trip. I think it was kind of 6 p.m. to about lunchtime the next day. And they seat people. You don't get to choose your seat. They seat people. And the woman that was seated next to me started talking in Chicago and did not stop until DC. And she had some theories, let me tell you. And I was like, is he on a British train? I would just get up and move politely, etc. But I just couldn't. But they were pretty good, but they just do not serve that much of the country. There's a huge gap in the middle where there is no train transport. And also with a bike, you can only get on and off at manned stations, which means the big cities. So it does make it more difficult.
Wow. So if you wanted to stop off at a smaller station, you're not allowed to?
No, on the coastal routes is easier, but the big routes, no, you can only get off at the big stations. So you couldn't get on and off with your bike between Houston in Texas and New Orleans, which was a problem for me. So I found Amtrak quite difficult to navigate, but fine with the trains once you get used to the fact that all the lines had their different rules about bikes and etc.
It's a bit the same in France, actually. France is like you can take a bike, I think, on every type of train, but there are different rules. But something that's definitely come up, and in our region, in the Occitanie region this year, so a little heads up for anyone listening who's coming to France for summer. I always say to people, if you're going to use the trains in France, use just the normal TER trains, not the intercities and not the TGVs. The TER trains, you generally don't need to book, but now in summertime you do. So it doesn't cost you, but you still need to make a booking. And it's not every region that you have to make a booking.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying because the SNCF app, it's not necessarily from the app that you have to book your bike.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I can see that, because actually there was a point where I was going from, I can't remember where it was, Saint-Jean to something, to Carcassonne, I think. Anyway, wherever I was, I needed to be on that train because I had a wine lunch to go, a vigneron's lunch
You
to go
needed to
to.
be on that train.
I needed to be on that train. Those barbecued quails were not going to eat themselves. So I needed to be on that train. And I'd rocked up very relaxed because I'd not had a problem hitherto with the bike. And oh my word, I've never seen the train door opened and there were already, 3 or 4 people standing with bikes in the hallway of the
I've
train
been
door.
there.
And then there was me, there were kind of 3 other people that wanted to get on with the bikes, but it was glorious, jolly chaos. Everyone pushed on with the bikes. I was just like, okay, I'm going to crush people, but I need to be on this train, so let's let British politeness get out of the way. And people were like helping me and etc. And we all somehow crammed in. It's a situation where you can see that there's a guy literally that is just crammed into the loo, and he spent the entire trip in the toilet, except for when one woman really needed
to go to the toilet.
Oh, it was hilarious. But yes, that showed me that sometimes you had to be a little bit more flexible with your travel plans on busy routes. So I can see why they've done that.
There are some routes though where they've got like dedicated bike carriages. In fact, I think the Loire is one where, and maybe the Via Rona as well, where they put extra carriages on trains that are just for bikes and stuff as well.
Oh, amazing! Yeah,
in the more popular routes,
yeah,
for sure. And on the TGV, normally you're not allowed a bike that's assembled. Like you normally have to disassemble it and put it in a little bag, and that's a real pain.
Yeah.
But there are some that you can actually book an assembled bike on. And I think as the rolling stock gets refreshed, there's going to be more of that. But anyway, we digress. It was tricky for you because obviously then in the States when you're trying to navigate these distances and it's not possible, there's a lot of riding involved then.
Yeah, and it is. That was the thing, that I'm a completist and I would have loved to have done it without trains. It pained me, but it just had to be done. But even when, because I didn't think until, so the way that I do it is I don't add up my distances until I've finished writing the book. So long after I've got home, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a little ritual for me that the last thing I do before I send off the manuscript to my publisher is there's a little section at the back of each book, which is the vital statistics with, how far I've cycled, the climbing, how many croissants I'd eaten in France, for example, how many breakfasts in the UK. And
do you still remember some of that? Like, do you just remember that? Like, has some of it stayed in your mind?
I don't. Well, the annoying thing is that for the US, I felt I should do it in miles because that's obviously how they calculate and how it's also coming out in the States. And so that slightly mucked it up a bit because I had to do the conversion because all the others are in kilometers.
Kilometers sound so much better too.
Exactly. Well, that's why I chose to do it in kilometers in the first place. So I know that I did 2,334 kilometers in France, and then I did a little bit more in the UK. And I was fully expecting in the States for it to be dismal because it just felt like I wasn't doing that cycling. And I was away for it was my longest trip. I was away for, I think, over 3 months. So longer than I was going around the UK or France. And yet it didn't feel like that much. And then I added it up and it was considerably more than either of it, because you can be in the saddle and it almost merges into one in your memory because you're going between 2 significant points. So maybe you're going from Columbus, Ohio to Chicago, but actually that's going to take you like 3 days of riding and through not relatively featureless as we've discussed, but there's nothing that anyone from outside the region would potentially recognize in that journey. And so, yeah, I was really gratified, but there wasn't as much climbing because again the Midwest is pretty flat. In fact, the hilliest thing that I think the hilliest section that I did was the Californian coast, just because there was no big climbs. It was kind of very up and down. But yes, it really surprised me when I added it up that I did quite so much cycling. But also it pleased me because I was, as I said, very nervous about it. And in general, I had a really good experience in the States. And if anyone is listening to this thinking, I would love to cycle in the States, but I'm nervous, don't be. I would say that the sheer size of it means that the roads are often quite quiet, and people are so nice. As you might imagine, people in
Mm.
general are just interested, friendly. I had very few bad experiences with drivers. Yeah, I loved it. It was such a unique way to see a country that I thought I knew, but turns out I didn't.
That notion that you were talking about there, I remember speaking with a fan of the show who's from Australia, and we were talking about the trips that they had taken in the States and also in Australia. And coming from Australia, we have a car culture like the States, but there is aggression towards people on bikes, unfortunately, in a very not nice way. But I sort of said to them at the time, "Oh, what's it like in the States?" Because I sort of have this image that it's going to be exactly the same and maybe even worse. Because, I'm here thinking, American cars are huge. They're like massive. Like if I stood in front of one, do I even come above its bonnet anymore? I'm not sure. And they said, "Oh, it's one of the best countries they've ever toured in. And it's really friendly and it was really safe and they felt fine." Yeah, I have heard that before. And it's interesting that that was your experience as well.
I think it's my conclusion is that it's because it's so unusual that people are surprised to see you, and they don't have that negative preconception. There's certainly drivers in some parts of the UK, and I'd say mostly the southeast, get, just because there's so many cyclists, that there's a kind of ridiculous sort of war between the motorist and the cyclist, which it doesn't need to be. But in the States, they don't have that, oh, bloody cyclists, pay your road tax type thing. And so they want to ask you where you're going, what you're doing. Does it have a motor? Was the thing that I got a lot. And it's really gratifying because they don't cycle. They think whatever you're doing is incredible. Like they give you so, they really boost your confidence because occasionally they'll say, aren't you scared? And they will always warn you to watch out for the crazy drivers. But I honestly did not find that. I think until it's a little bit like when I did actually both the UK and France, the closer I got to the capital city, the worse the driving got.
Yeah, it's been my experience.
Yeah, just because it's more densely populated, people maybe are in more of a rush, etc. And
More
actually,
lanes of traffic comes
yeah,
into it
and
a little bit
definitely
too.
it was in New England, so it was actually closer to New York rather than DC. But the driving did get noticeably worse, and the roads were smaller, and it was busier. And I thought, okay, my trip is nearly done. It reminded me of when I got into southeast England, and I was like, oh, I can feel the pull of London and the aggression that is coming out of it. But until then, it was totally fine. Everyone was lovely. And they have what we don't have in the UK and you don't really have in France is they have very wide shoulders on the roads because space is not an issue. And so even though you don't always want to cycle on those shoulders because there can be a bit of debris, they're not always the smoothest. It's really nice to feel you've got that space that you can move into if, you hear something really big coming behind you. It feels like a safety net. It's not all narrow country lanes and hedges like, say, in the West Country here or Scotland whatever. It's just I found that quite secure. The roads are quite big.
You were talking earlier on about trying to figure out which direction to go in and the prevailing winds. How were the prevailing winds through the midsection? Open flat country. I'm sort of thinking, did you score some storms? Did you have some block headwind days? Or actually, I think worse than block headwinds, actually really strong gusty crosswinds personally.
I got lucky because I do. The only day that I really remember relentless headwind was in Central California, actually, and that was very miserable. But in the Midwest, I realized, so one of the big lessons from this trip was how naive I was towards countries that are not kind of Western Europe. And I didn't really think about the natural hazards that America offers. And one of the things I didn't think about was twisters. I mean, I've seen Twister, I've seen whatever Twister 2 was. I'm aware of the existence of twisters. It just didn't really ever occur to me that this could be in the same environment. And then I was in the Midwest, and a couple of people said to me, well, it's been a really wild twister season already this year. And I just thought, hang on, I've got no idea what to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so I asked someone in Columbus, and they said, oh, I think that you're meant to get into a ditch. Don't go in a sort of a bridge or a tunnel, which, having seen Twister, I'm well aware that you shouldn't do. But there aren't that many ditches. There's some drainage ditches by the side of the road, but there aren't that many. It's very flat. So that was a concern to me. And I had to download a proper weather app just to be sure. But the worst thing that happened to me weather-wise, well, one of the worst things that happened to me weather-wise was there was the worst and horrific storms when I was in Ohio. And it just, that very terrifying fork lightning. And I just thought, I don't really know what you're supposed to do with lightning. I was trying to, it's
Oh,
really scary. It's just the weather there. And it's getting a little bit more like that here, but I'm still not really used to it, how violent the weather is there. So it's not just, it will rain and it will rain for, 15 minutes and then it will be dry again. It is just like someone turned on a tap above you.
yeah, it's not a dreich. It's not a dreich
No,
sort of miserly day.
exactly. I don't mind rain, but I was not prepared for the severity of the weather there. But I was lucky that no twisters crossed my path, thank goodness. But yeah, definitely get down in any depression you can find and put your bike away from you. So, if it gets caught up, you don't get hit by the bike.
Mm.
Hopefully no one else will need that advice.
I remember going for a ride where I live in the Pyrenees, and it's so funny. So one of my passions is photography, and I felt like I hadn't done a lot of photography lately, and I thought I need to get on my bike and I just go and look at the landscape and take some photos. And I remember getting to a point and it was all beautiful, la-di-da, yay, I'm on the bike, I'm taking photos, and I got this great shot of the typical dark blue brooding storm cloud in the distance. And I'm at a high point. The landscape looks mega, and you can't get that perception in a photograph anyway. I thought, oh, hey, that's a great shot. And then 5 minutes later, oh my gosh, it was the furthest point away from home, FYI. So it always
Mm,
happens when you're not close to home,
yeah,
and in the middle of nowhere, the biggest booming thunderstorm of my life, and the thunder booms there.
yeah,
Like, you almost feel like it's coming through your bike, and it's like and fork lightning, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm pretty sure I shouldn't be under a tree,
yeah,
but I don't know,
yeah.
like, am I safe on my bike? And then I had these stupid thoughts. It's going to sound so stupid, listeners, and some of you will probably tell me in a very matter-of-fact way what I should do, but I had this thought, well, hang on, are the rubber tires going to be safe? Like, I don't
That's a
know.
thought
I actually
yeah, a
still
thought
don't know.
I had in Maine. And yes, no, it is safer. Rubber tires are good. Obviously, rubber soled shoes are good, but you are meant to crouch. So
Not
you're
on a metal
saying
bike, though.
no, no. So I think what you're supposed to do, because I actually looked it up after I got caught in a really horrendous storm in Maine, and I looked up what I was supposed to do later, and because it was so wet that I couldn't use my phone in the storm. And I found that the US Weather Service was no help because it assumes that you will always have a vehicle that you can be in or a building that you can go into. And one of the things that I found very frustrating about America, unfairly, but still I did find it frustrating, was that there are just
No
nothing.
buildings. Yeah.
There's no buildings. There's just nothing. Everything is private property. There's no buildings. There's no old stone shepherd's hut or bus shelter or anything. Those things just do not exist. So you're meant to crouch and have a small surface area on the ground as possible, but make yourself as small as possible. So that is what you're supposed to do if you don't have if you don't have a car. That's courtesy of the UK Met Office.
Something I wanted to go back on, you mentioned how people were asking you, aren't you scared? And that was more in reference to the drivers and stuff. But something I wanted to ask you, doing these journeys solo, and I know you've done some journeys with people as well, but as a solo traveler, how has that part of your travel evolved from, the first few times where you ever were solo on a bike to now? Do you feel totally fine every day? Are there moments where you are a little bit and unsettled about it? You do camp as well on your own. Like, how have you felt? And people's perceptions of what you do, because I think people perceive it to be very dangerous and often they can push fear into you that you didn't have. But how are you about that?
Um, I really enjoy it when I'm on my own on the bike. So the first time that I did it by myself was on my French trip. I had my friend Matt, the one that said that he wouldn't cycle with me this time. he came with me for the start of the French trip.
You nearly killed him.
I nearly killed him. Yeah, he didn't.
Not literally, just he wasn't bike fit by
No, literally, I would say that he had a very red face.
yeah, it sounded it.
And yeah. Also in the UK, nearly killed him. So anyway, he didn't cycle this time. But I remember saying goodbye to him in Brittany. He got the ferry back from, I now can't remember, but maybe Saint Malo as well. And I waved goodbye and I rode off, and I was like, there's no one following me. It's just me. And I had a really unexpected, surprising feeling of total freedom. And I love Matt's company. We'd had such a good time. But I suddenly realized that I was completely on my own. I could do what I want. I did have a plan and I had a book to write. But it just really surprised me that how much I enjoyed that feeling of being completely my own boss, not having to think about what someone else wanted to do. And one of the things that I do struggle with on these trips, as opposed to just the trips that I've done that are not in any way book related, which I like to also go cycle touring just for pleasure, is that I'm in charge on these trips. And so I hate that feeling of route planning and then thinking, is this too far? Would they prefer to stop? Because,
I know 100% what you're talking about. Yeah.
you're just like, I've realized in France that what I like to do is I like to cycle like maybe 25, 30 kilometers and then have breakfast.
Mm.
I like to strike camp or whatever, get out the motel, mostly in France, strike camp, and then get up and get some kilometers under my belt and then stop and really enjoy breakfast, because I like to set off early. But other people they don't want to do that. They want to have something to eat and etc. And because I know how far we've got to go, I'm sort of drumming my fingers mentally thinking, we've got to get going, we can't be dilly-dallying, etc. And if you're on your own, you've only got yourself to blame if you wind up, taking it too far and then not being able to find anything to eat. It's, you can't really blame yourself, so that's fine. You'll learn from it. But with someone else, I just feel that responsibility. On the flip side, it's so nice to sit down and have lunch with someone. It's great when you're camping to have someone to like chat about which the awful shower is in the shower block or whatever. I don't know. I miss the company when I'm off the bike, but I really totally fine with cycling on my own. And there's only been a couple of times where, sometimes you're very much in your own head when you're cycling and you play out scenarios and you just think, has that van passed me twice? Are they going to be waiting at the next, like,
I think everyone listening to this has felt this.
exactly. And you're just like, should I say that, friends are waiting for me on ahead? And you've got this rehearsed scenario, which I never needed. But I suppose that's the only thing that I felt, very occasionally that catastrophizing happens. But that's happened to me in, everywhere I cycled. It wasn't a US thing. I think the only thing that was slightly different camping in the US was that the campsites were very remote. They were sort of primitive. They called them campsites, which gives you a good idea of them. And so it was lovely. It was very much different from, say, your French family campsite with, your
kids singing karaoke at like 9 p.m.
Exactly. And everyone doing the chicken song and etc. There wasn't that.
Champs-Elysees.
Yeah, there wasn't that, and there was no like big French guy offering to come and help you put up your tent or whatever. But it was also, the pitches are very far apart. They're designed for people coming in with cars. I lost a lot of food to raccoons because I literally had nowhere that I could have food. My tent was a body bag, basically.
You have said this in your book, and I was wondering, is it like a swag? In Australia, we would call it a swag. Is it like a bivvy or something? Or is it like a one-man, like tiny one-person
The tent
tent?
I took this time is even smaller than the previous body bag. I borrowed it from a friend, and it's designed for mountaineering. So it's one of those
It must be a
tents
bivvy. Yeah.
basically pitch on the side of a mountain, and it's got toothpick like pegs and etc., which I lost about 5 of. Sorry, Gemma. But it's so small and you're so vulnerable. And then you realize that in America, I remember being in the middle of the night Googling, do they have bears in Indiana, and finding out, occasionally, yeah, they do have bears in Indiana, it turns out. So I made a lot of use of a Spotify barking dogs soundtrack in the middle of the night.
I love this. No.
Yeah.
But they're the crazy things that you start thinking in your head. I think some of the scariest I've ever been has been wild camping in my tent, hearing a noise, which is, I remember being so scared hearing a noise on my tent. And then in the morning realizing it was like some long grass that was just brushing
Yeah.
against the side. But in my head, it was a rapist or something, like you just go to the most
Yeah.
extreme thing. In fact, researched and picked up little tips. Something, and I haven't tried this before, but something someone had said about how to get more comfortable wild camping, because a lot of people catastrophize. What are those bizarre sounds I've never heard before? Someone has said actually earplugs is actually a good technique, because if you can't hear it, you're not scared of it. Now, I'm anxious and I don't know how I'd feel about not hearing something. And there's no
Yeah.
earplug that you can hear nothing. But yeah, that might be something to try. And maybe listeners, if that's something you do, please get in touch with me and let me know. Have you heard of that theory before? And would you try it, Felicity?
I did take earplugs more for the hostel situation, which they were useful for. But I don't know. I feel like I'd like to hear someone. I don't know why someone's stealing my bike. What was I going to do if someone was stealing my bike? I wasn't going to get out. They might have a gun.
Well, that's my thought as well. Like, I'm not going to get,
Yeah,
I don't have anything I want to save. Well, I do.
exactly.
I
So
do, obviously, but not over me.
yeah, exactly. So no, I didn't try that. I probably should have done that, because there was a lot of what I just hadn't appreciated how much large wildlife hang out in American forests.
I never thought about raccoons taking food, and it sounds totally valid now, but that's because I've just not had experience with raccoons.
No, groundhogs. Yeah, I didn't think there was another animal like deer.
Groundhogs are like marmots, aren't they? Or they're a type of marmot.
Yeah, I never saw the groundhog, and I'm only guessing it was, but it sounded like a massive guinea pig,
Oh, I
like
was going to say they
snuffling.
whistle, don't
I just heard like a lot of snuffling and heavy breathing, and it was distinct from the raccoons that had already stolen my breakfast. It's just, I mean, Americans hear this and they just laugh because it's so naive. But all I was thinking about was bears. I didn't appreciate the other things that weren't bears.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was just something that I wasn't prepared for in any way.
I want to quickly ask, you haven't just taken trips that have involved writing books, you have done other tours, and one of the ones that I did want to discuss with you was the Hebridean Way.
Mm.
Me and a very good friend, Alison. Hi, Alison. We have backed and forth a little bit about it, and I want to know what it's like.
It's amazing. I was bigging it up to someone yesterday actually who was about to do it and is scared. And my memories of it, oh, it was the most glorious, glorious time. You have to be okay with rain because it will almost inevitably rain.
So Alison's Scottish, and I know that she is. She's a trooper on all levels and absolutely amazing. And I need to mentally prepare for that.
Good thing about it is, I would say, because I've also cycled in Shetland, done the length of Shetland.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, what's great about the Outer Hebrides is that it's more settled. You're on this, one of the main roads, basically. I can't remember whether it is the main road, but you're on a road that has lots of crofts on it. It will have, tea shops and stuff. I'm not saying that it's built up.
Is it also where there's cake boxes? Like there's
That's Shetland. So there is a little bit of that on the Hebridean Way, as
like
in
how to
there are
bring it back to
cafes.
food.
Cake fridges, Shetland, you need to go for. They are incredible. Would recommend. Shetland is also a really lovely place to cycle, but it's a little bit more empty and wild. Like one of the islands on Shetland, we realised that we were there on Sunday and nothing was open to sell us food, not even the leisure centre where we thought, oh, people will be taking their kids swimming. We'll be able to get a bag of crisps from a vending machine. That was not open on a Sunday either. So we
Wow.
did end up with literally nothing to eat. And luckily, we were going to stay with a lovely chap called Willie McLeod, who rustled us up a frozen pizza, which was very kind of him. But yeah, it's Hebridean Way is very beautiful. It's not. What's interesting to me is from a relatively short distance, the scenery, the culture changes so much from the Barrett in the south to Lewis in the north. And you really feel that changing. It's just magical. And taking those little ferries and, the stones of Callanish, all of the archaeological things. Yeah, I could not recommend it highly enough.
Is there a direction you should do it in?
I think most people do it from south to north.
Yeah, okay. I'm just thinking prevailing winds or
Yeah. I think that's probably the reason. I'm trying to think there's something else that I wanted to say about the Hebridean Way. I think there's only one big hill, which is between Harris and Lewis, which are the same island but separated by a large hill in the middle, which obviously in times before people wanted to cycle up hills for pleasure would have made them effectively two separate islands. And it's nothing massive, and the views are spectacular. And if you do it, there's a little seafood van, or there certainly was when I did it in 2019, actually, some time ago. There was a little seafood van parked that it's quite easy to overshoot as you're doing the descent. But if you're there around lunchtime, going to the seafood van, yeah, that is definitely one to stop at.
Oh, see, these are all when I do it, I'm so hitting you up.
Please do. I won't tell you where I got the battered pizza in Stornoway because I don't know whether you want to
Oh, no,
experience
I'm not sure that I want to experience. I've got a list of things I want to experience when I go to Scotland, because I will be riding with Alice very soon, and one of them is soup and sandwich. I've not experienced that.
or soup and a scone. I like. I think
Ooh.
that's one of the nicest things about you don't get it so much down south is just the nice lentil soup and a scone.
Oh, wow. Well, actually, tatty scones is another one on my list.
They're really good.
Yeah, so I'm hitting it. I have to try iron brew. I haven't done that yet. Oh gosh, this sounds
Yeah,
so wrong telling
you know,
everyone this, but anyway,
I'd try it. Not
yeah,
necessarily
Alison quipped maybe with vodka, and I don't know if she was joking or not. I guess I'll find out.
vodka. Yeah, buckfast.
Square sausage,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Non-sausage. Yeah,
tunnocks, which I have had before, but I have to go anyway.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there's other stuff that I've forgotten.
There's so much great stuff. I love Scotland food. I'm actually going to Orkney cycling in June, and I'm very excited to find out what the Orcadian specialities are because I'm not
Oh,
quite sure with Orkneyan food. So that, yeah, I've
it's
already
so
looked.
far up there as well, so there'd be a different influence, right?
Well, so what I found interesting about Shetland and what I hadn't really appreciated was that an Orkney only became part of Scotland in I think the 15th century. Scottish readers, please feel free to correct me, but it was part of sort of the Norwegian kingdom until then, and so there's not a Celtic culture up there at all. They don't speak Gaelic. There's none of that, and they have something in Shetland called reestit mutton, which is sort of salted mutton stewed, which reminded me of being in the north of Norway where that kind of thing goes on. It was very, very interesting.
There's some Scottish soup that's made with fish that's really, it's like,
Cullen skink.
Cullen skink.
Yeah, it's named after there's a village, I think, called Cullen up on the Moray Firth. Definitely people are writing in to correct me on this. But I think it's named after the village and it's smoked fish.
Ooh.
It's very good.
That's definitely on my list. And I have to have something on a Calmac ferry, which I've been told could be a bacon buddy.
Okay, so on the Calmac ferry.
Calmac ferry is one of my experiences too.
Yes, well, you will certainly do that if you do the Hebridean way. Yeah, no, if you can keep your stomach while all around you are vomiting, then they do do some good food.
I'm the worst for getting seasick. I remember my husband and I, when we were in Australia, we hired a yacht in a beautiful area in Australia and Victoria called the Gippsland Lakes. And I said to my husband, "Will I get seasick?" And he goes, "We're on a lake." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Anyway, we were on a lake, but it was very, very freaking windy. I think it was like 25 or 30 knots. And the first hour and a half, the yacht was rocking and Bella was green. Like it was,
Oh,
I was regretting all life choices for sure. Anyway,
yeah, yeah,
but I am looking forward to a Calmac ferry experience because I love the idea that, I mean, it's similar to a train, but obviously just over the water, but just combining those different modes of travels to get to those beautiful places and those islands.
yeah,
Can I ask,
yeah.
with your tour through the UK or Britain, which area were you most enamored by?
Oh, that's it's difficult to say. I think the place that I loved that I didn't expect, and I didn't really know, I didn't have any expectations of positive or negative, but I hadn't really realised that I hadn't explored it before, was West Wales. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, I didn't end up exploring that by bike because I managed to tear my hamstring.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I had two accidents in the UK, neither of which took place actually on the bike. One of which I fell down a stream while looking at an ancient barrow, like a Neolithic barrow in Wiltshire,
That's
because I
such a
see it.
random sentence. I fell down a stream looking under an ancient
So
barrow.
one of the things I love about cycle touring, that you're slow enough that you see the sign saying Ancient Barrow and you think, you know what, I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at that. I don't have to think of somewhere to park. I'm not going so fast that I don't think, oh, what was that sign? Didn't have time to look. So I was like, I'm going to look at that Ancient Barrow. I'm not in a hurry. I think we were going to Bath, maybe. I can't remember where we were going. Anyway, or maybe it was the day we camped in Glastonbury. Yes, it was. So anyway, and I came off this little wooden bridge with my bike with panniers, etc. And I was wearing cleats again and maybe a sign. And I managed to step on some grass that was attached sideways. And so I fell into this stream and my bike fell on top of me. And my friend had been like, I don't know, saying hi to some horses or something. And she just heard this, fuck! Where's she gone? And she could not see me. And she had to pull the bike off me, pull me out. And yeah, I ripped my hamstring then. And then unfortunately spent a night in A&E because I got an infected blackthorn wound from falling off the bike because my hamstring hurt so much when I unclipped, and spent the night in sort of Glastonbury Cottage Hospital.
That's another random sentence, but oh my gosh, it sounds painful too.
Yes, and it was painful. And then in West Wales, going down to the beach for a lovely cold water swim,
Ooh.
I managed to slip on some mud. I mean, it's a very British beach sentence, cold water and mud, and ripped it further. And I could cycle a lot faster than I could walk properly, but I couldn't cycle in West Wales. And I really regret that because it was so beautiful. It was just absolutely astonishing. If there's any people here that are thinking, I don't know, I'm wondering where to go cycling or walking or whatever in holiday in the UK, please think of West Wales. It's gorgeous. Just astonishing.
Those moments of serendipity as well, where something totally unexpected, totally unplanned happens, to me, they're part of the best thing about riding as well, where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's up next. There's that flexibility you built in. There's something I read that you had said when you said, the difficulty with traveling is keeping on top of the day-to-day while also keeping an eye on the future, but not making too many firm plans because the best things pop up last minute, and a little flexibility is usually helpful. Actually, maybe that's life in general. And I wanted to know about a moment of serendipity in the US where something totally unplanned, you didn't know existed, popped up into your day, maybe changed the course of that day, maybe was just something that's left a lasting impression.
Oh,
Great quote, by the way.
I know. I'm now trying to think. I mean, this is going to sound niche, but if anyone's read any of my other books, they will know that I love a very niche museum. Like, the more obscure, the better. So in the UK, I went to a baked bean museum in South Wales. And in France, I went to the apple tapping museum in the Loire Valley.
I was waiting for that to be in Normandy for some reason, but okay.
No. You don't have to be in Normandy to tap your apples. And in the States, as well as the popcorn museum in the world capital of popcorn, but I knew I was going to there.
Did they play the popcorn song there?
That is a missed opportunity. They did not. But they have a fascinating display of antique poppers, should anyone be interested. Poppers of the popcorn variety, not the drug variety. I was in Maine, and I saw this sign for the National Salmon Hatchery, and I was like, that's a sign that looks like it's a visitor attraction. And I had a friend with me, and I was like, would you mind if we just went down that little road just to see? And actually the traffic in Maine was quite bad, and I didn't mind it. By that point I was used to it, but she was fine. She'd just come over from the UK. She was finding it a bit miserable, and she was like, sure, fine. And we went down off the main road into this lovely, just like gorgeous wooded, forested area that was just blissfully quiet, little cabins of the kind where you're just thinking, I could live here, and you see somewhere, you just think, I would like it here. And it was a lake. I mean, I love a lake, and that America really does a lake well, I will say. And they had this salmon hatchery, this enormous salmon statue, and they had this little really quirky museum. We were the only people in the museum. My friend was not interested. She spent the whole time on her phone, calling her out on it. Carolyn, you're a terrible tourist. But I went round, and it was talking all about how the Atlantic salmon has basically was fished out of existence. And that surprised me because in the States, as certainly in the UK, there's just salmon on every single menu. And I'm thinking, where is all this salmon coming from? And it turns out that it mostly comes from Canada and Scotland and Norway and places like that. But the history of it, something that I knew absolutely nothing about, that really informed me going forward in terms of what I was ordering and what I was eating. I just said I never would have seen that in a million years had I been in a car. And I just found that, like, what a nerdy museum. I mean, if they'd sold souvenir mugs, I would have bought one. It was just perfect. Yeah, it was brilliant.
That is a thing, though, and that's what I like about bike travel. It's sort of fast enough that you can still feel like you're moving along, but slow enough that you can read the signs and actually take the detours. Whereas it's no different to, when you've been in a car and you've seen something, oh, that's amazing. Oh, no, I can't stop. There's someone behind me, or I can't turn off, or there is no, but on a bike you can stop. Even if it's not a detour, you can stop to look at the view even longer. I really
You can
love
take
that.
photo, you can say, oh, that shop looks interesting, that restaurant looks nice. There's that flexibility that I love. But as you say, unlike if you were walking, you're covering enough distance that you see interesting things. I love a long distance walk, but you're not really realistically covering more than 30k a day. And so there's not that opportunity. Whereas I'm always astonished when I look at the distances that I did in the States. And even given how big the States is, if you look at a map, I can still see bits that I've cycled the whole of. And I find that astonishing. Like, how did I do that?
Isn't it an awesome feeling too?
Exactly. Just that sort of just me and all of the calories I was eating got me through those miles.
You were probably in calorie deficit too. I know you're like me, Felicity. You're a food champ, and you wouldn't pass down an opportunity to have a something. But I find that you can't eat enough. And actually, on the other end of the spectrum, on the harder days, sometimes you just can't get the appetite to eat. Have you had that before as well?
Yeah, and I really struggle with heat. As I say, I'm more of a northern looking person, and I found the heat in the States. And actually, in parts of did I get it in France? I mean, I was really unlucky when I was in France with the weather. The UK had a heat wave. I was getting pictures of my dog sunbathing in
Well,
Buckinghamshire, and I was literally shivering on the Côte d'Azur. But in the States, the heat was relentless from early May onwards. It was just stifling, and I don't feel hungry when it's hot. And I struggled with that because I knew that I needed to eat. I wanted to eat, but I just couldn't, and that was a bit of a problem.
did you have to change your riding routine for that? Like, did you find yourself? I mean, you did mention you leave early when you can anyway, but did you find you were riding and then stopping in the middle of the day and then riding later in the evening at all, or did you cut days short?
I had to be more sensible about that because, as I said, I hadn't taken these things seriously. And so when I was in Texas, and I quickly realized that I had to start before dawn. I mean, it was so humid that I would get on my bike and already the handle, I'd wheel it out of the motel room and the handlebars would already be wet with just humidity. And what I started doing was just doing a long morning and then stopping somewhere for either a long lunch, but that's, as I mentioned, quite difficult in the States because you don't linger and there's little in the way of, say, a public park where you could find a bench and just like have a nap. Like, in cities, if they're there, then there's a lot of people that are in quite a bad state that are in those parks. And outside cities, they just don't really seem to exist. There's not a lot of public space in a way that I would say is more common in Europe. It's a bit harder from that point of view. So I'd often just finish early for the day. So just get the miles in before lunch and then just have a cold shower after lunch. But I did find that tricky because I'm just not used to it and I don't cope very well with it. So yeah, rehydration tablets were my friend. I hadn't had any need for them on my previous trips, but they were definitely very necessary.
And heat's no joke too. Like, heat stroke is really, really serious. I actually had heat stroke when I was, I would say, a little tacker, when I was, I think, about 6 or 7. Not riding, but yeah, I did wind up in hospital for a few days and it was pretty serious. And
Mm.
funnily enough, it's probably some of the earlier memories that I have too. Anyway, slight tangent. Let's segue into something that's totally not related to heat stroke. Something that I definitely do, Felicity, and I feel like you may be similar in this. When I get nostalgic moments, sometimes I have something called food nostalgia. So I will cook something from the place that I have great memories from. And I wonder, is that something that you do? Like, do you know what I'm talking about when I say food
Yeah.
nostalgia?
Yeah, definitely. I do. And because this book that I've just finished writing has recipes in, I've been lucky enough that I can revisit the greatest hits, as in I've either written recipes or I begged recipes from people that, made food that I wanted. So, for example, when I was in Maine, the woman that I stayed with made incredible blueberry muffins. And so I wrote to her and said, please, can I have the recipe? And it's just, but the thing that has makes me think of America more than anything else is that kind of Texas Mexican food, just because it's something that we don't find here. And I find myself really craving that. So I've been making breakfast taco filled dumplings, which say is a bit of a spin on Texas food. But one thing that I need to learn how to make, they do these puffy tacos, which are basically deep fried tacos, and they've kind of got the texture of like between an Indian paratha and a prawn cracker. Like they're very light.
I was nearly initially picturing like a curry puff sort of texture, but it's not like that at all.
No, it's difficult to describe. It's kind of light, but also
Crispy?
quite deliciously crispy, but also a bit doughy. It's so nice. And they let me into the kitchen to see how they do it. And you need a special tool to shake the tacos. And I found myself thinking, could I make one of those? Bear in mind, I'm the least practical person ever. I was like, is there something that I could use to make these? I really, really want to recreate them. And I just realized I can't even get the raw materials to make the proper tacos here. I could probably buy a 500 kilo sack of the special flour, but it's just really hard to get hold of the nixtamalized corn in the UK. So yeah, that is something that's going to have to wait until I get back to Texas, because I do not think it's possible to do here.
But do you find yourself doing that then? Because your books do have recipes, and I mean, tribute to your food column, listeners, you can guarantee that these recipes will work because that is really what you do. You make
Yeah,
sure that if you're putting a recipe out there, you have tested it and perfected it, really,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I
yeah,
really
yeah,
really
yeah.
love. But do you find yourself sometimes, say, taking yourself off to your tour through the UK and Britain? Do you take yourself through France and go, oh, I wouldn't mind? Like, do you ever make a cassoulet thinking, and then it takes you to, and when you do, are you thinking, I'm going to make the Toulouse version, or I'm going to go to Castle Naudry today, or or is it going to be Carcassonne? Like, do you do that with your food nostalgia as well? Like sometimes you'll just think of something, right, I'm having that for dinner tonight.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Cassoulet is a really good case in point, just because I love it so much. It's so satisfying. And so listeners might not know that there are three alleged main types of cassoulet from Carcassonne, Castelnaudary, and Toulouse. And I have done I have done the trio twice. So I have been in 2 days eaten the three types. It's quite a heavy, I would say, bean based, fatty, meaty dish. And both times it was in high summer, and I I just ate them. I think one day definitely I had cassoulet for lunch and dinner.
Hang on. You've done 3 cassoulet within 2 days. That, oh my gosh, you need a medal. You know, there's you were talking about Mont Ventoux. There's like the Chinglet, I think it's de Ventoux, which is like where you climb all 3 summits in a day, and there's like a special club. But to do like 3 cassoulet in 2 days, I think you deserve a medal.
I think I do as well. But I mean, I think the first time it was on that first cycle trip with friends, and I think they maybe had one or two cassoulet, and I was like, I don't care. I just want to test the difference. And that's, I think, when you're a very greedy food obsessed person, you're like, I need to taste this. I just need to know which I prefer, and etc.
Can I get you on record to say which one you do prefer?
Oh, well, the thing is that you can find sources saying that, everything that they say is, oh, this is a Toulouse or this is Carcassonne. You can also find a reputable source saying, oh, no, that, vice versa or whatever. So the idea that there's three separate entities that are very distinct is suspicious to me. But I love any of the confit duck. So delicious. I mean, I also realized that I like them a little bit soupier than I thought I did. So I
Mm.
think I had a really great one in. I think it was actually in Toulouse. I had a lovely one, and I can't remember where now. But I love all kinds of cassoulet, and I admit that I have a tin of that really great quality tinned
They
cassoulet.
do that. They do
Yeah,
yeah, but never cheap out on it though.
Yeah, it's not the supermarket own brand. It's it's the proper, is it Belle Chorison or something, and it's been sitting on my shelf since I was in the Alps last year actually, and at some point it's got to be it's got to be cracked out.
Felicity, you have to promise me when you crack it open, you need to send me a photo. Tag me. I was so that sounds awesome.
Oh, I love. Oh, they're great camping food. If anyone's in France and they have a camping stove, then those tins and jars of like cassoulet and things are
They
incredible.
are. I've done that with like ratatouille is another one that I've used quite a lot
Yeah.
as well. And actually, this sounds horrible, and I'm saying it to a proper food person, so please don't judge me. But put your cycle touring hunger hat on. I have bulked out a tinned ratatouille with camp pasta many a time before, and it's been amazing.
It's not me that you had to be worried about. It's the niçoise here. They're the ones coming for you with pitchforks.
Oh well. Shh. Felicity, I want you to do something which I ask all of my guests to do, and that is I want you to share one day of your trip. It can be any day. I want it to be from your recent trip through the States,
Mm,
and I want
okay.
you to take me and the listeners there and tell us about what happened on this day.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna choose. I'm actually going to change my mind. I was going to talk about Maine, but I feel like we've talked quite a lot about Maine and the extreme weather in Maine. So I'm actually going to choose Long Island. So this was the no, it was the last full day of my trip, in the sense that I spent about a week in New York at the end, but it was a last, on a cycle tour, like it's not a cycle tour when you're just, going from, pedaling around a town, like your last day on the road where you've
Mm.
got nothing to do but cycle, which is my favorite feeling in the world, that you don't have any appointments, you don't have any of this. You are just on your bike, turning your legs round and round and like stopping if something seems interesting. It's just the joy. So I had that and I woke up. So it was the day after my birthday. For my birthday, I had splashed out in a way that still pains me. I'm still paying off my credit card at a hotel on Shelter Island, which is kind of just north of the Hamptons at the end of Long Island. And it was a very beautiful hotel. It looked like something from a glossy sort of Ralph Lauren advert. I would say that I didn't really fit in that well there. So I spent the evening drinking champagne and watching trashy reality TV in my room, which was actually great. I had a brilliant time. My brother very sweetly sent some champagne up to my room, which I was like, that was such a nice thing to do. Anyway, so I drank a magnum of champagne on my own, it being my birthday, and I can't waste champagne. And so I woke up feeling all
Hang
right,
on, whoa, whoa,
actually.
whoa! You had a magnum of champagne on your
I
own.
know,
Oh,
I know, I know. It's
no judgment. Power to you. I mean, this is coming from someone who had 3 cachets in 2 days, so
I wouldn't advise it, but actually I felt all right the next day, except I had to take a little ferry. So I get up. I was actually quite relieved to leave the fancy hotel because I like being on the road. I felt more myself when I was back in my lycra that I'd washed in the fancy hotel bathroom. I felt more myself, and I was like, toodaloo, cycle off. I had to go across 2 islands to get down to the Hamptons and then head west to New York. And I started to feel a little bit queasy on the ferry, but it was actually okay. Sea air, and then I passed the hotel that Justin Timberlake had recently been arrested after having just one martini in and driving. Just one martini, Justin. So that made me laugh. And so things were looking up. I was so pleased to be back on the road. And the Hamptons, I don't know if it's somewhere you'd been.
no, I
I'd
haven't.
never been. I'd seen it on reality TV shows, a bit of an interest of mine. And I really wanted to visit. I wanted to see where the sort of the money of the East Coast was. And I'm sure it's one of those places that I found a lot in the States, and do also certainly I've seen them in France as well, where very wealthy people are. It's actually not as interesting as you would think for people watching, because everything is behind high walls. It's sort of
Big
there's
compounds.
yeah, exactly. You can't actually nose at them. It was a bit like when I was in California. I kind of thought I'd be able to go for a latte at Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex's favorite coffee shop. Could I find a coffee shop in Montecito? No, it was all rich people doing rich people
Things.
things privately, which is fair enough. Anyway, and so I found the Hamptons. I was excited about them. I stopped for a really great croissant, actually, a French-run bakery, which the day started. That's good stuff. And then the road got very busy, and I realized that it was all New Yorkers coming it was sort of just before the 4th of July weekend. So a lot of New Yorkers were heading out in the opposite direction. And I got to this place, I think it was, I can't remember the name of it. It had the name of an English town. And I was going through gawking at all of the fancy shops and all the wealthy people and all the 4x4s. I mean, oh my God, the Range Rovers and the this and the that. There's money here. And then suddenly someone said to me, they had a crossing guard, like a teenage boy that was employed with a high-vis gilet on to, help people across the crossings because there were so many enormous cars. And he said, "Oh, ma'am, you can't cycle down this street." And I was like, "What is this?" It wasn't a motorway; it was a shopping street. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You're not allowed to cycle. You'll have to wheel your bike down the pavement." And I said, "But sorry, the people are allowed to drive, but I can't cycle down this street with pedestrian crossings and etc."
If you
And he
could
said,
see
"Yeah."
my face, like, what?
I know. He said, "Yeah, but it's because of the car. There are cars behind you." And I was thinking, so sorry that the fact that I might hold them up when they should be going very slowly anyway in this heavily pedestrianised area. I thought the Hamptons are not for me. I'm afraid it's not. That seemed to me so wrong-headed. Anyway, and so I sort of I got off that road and I headed north. And probably people from Long Island would maybe say to the real Long Island where people live all year round and etc. And I saw a sign and it said only 5 miles to the Big Duck. And I thought, what is the Big Duck? And I got really excited. I thought, I'm not going to stop and Google the Big Duck. I want it to reveal itself to me as it comes closer. So in my mind, I was just going through forest. It was a very quiet road. I was like, what could it be? What could it be? What could it be? Could it be a duck restaurant? Could it be? I don't even know what I could think the Big Duck was. And then I saw it and it was like this enormous, like, I guess, fiberglass duck with a door set in it, like a white duck with a yellow beak, like a model duck, a building that was shaped like a duck. And it had a door in it. And I just thought I have to stop and see the Big Duck. But it didn't say, it said, "Welcome to the Big Duck," but it didn't say what the Big Duck was. And there were some people waiting outside the door of the Big Duck. And so I kind of walked past them and tried the door, and the door was locked, but I could see people inside. And I said to people, "What is it? Like, is it like a nightclub, a one in, one out policy?" And they were like, "We don't know." We're not sure. Anyway, it turned out they went in. Some people came out, they went in. I wasn't allowed in with them. And then some Korean girls turned up and they were saying to me, "What is this duck?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just waiting here in line. I had no idea what the duck is." And they were like, "Is it a gift shop?" I said, "Honestly, I've no idea, but I'm waiting here." Eventually, I got into the Big Duck and it was like a museum. It's quite meta. It was a museum to itself. So it was this it was, I think, a 1920s or 1930s marketing ploy. It originally, there'd been a lot of duck farms on Long Island. And so this guy had sold his duck from a roadside stand shaped like a big duck. And it reminded me in California, this guy had been to California and had seen they've got a lot of this programmatic, as it's called, architecture. I'd been to a donut drive-through that was shaped like an
a
enormous
donut.
donut. Exactly. And so the Big Duck was his homage to that. And
Could you buy duck there?
you couldn't buy duck, unfortunately. You could buy a lot of duck
Could you
merchandise.
get like a little rubber duck?
You could get, like, I think I bought a sticker, but you could get a book about the duck's history.
Did it have a name?
Called The Big Duck. It needs no further qualification. It was just the most hilarious thing. And then I went for an enormous, like, there's one of those big, like, Sopranos style New York sandwiches with the Parmesan on it, like the aubergine with loads of cheese. And then I had a classic Google routing thing because I usually use an app called Komoot for
Oh,
routing.
you got commuted.
Yeah, and with this one, I didn't find it that good in the States, so I relied on Google. Google hated me in New England, and it sent me down on this particular thing. It would send me like through forest in the middle of nowhere, a road that had last been a road in the 19th century, where I had to walk my bike through a river because the bridge had fallen in. But on this occasion, it was just sand. And when you're cycling, you're like, "Oh, this road's a bit rough, but it'll be fine." And then you realize that it's so rough that you can't clip in anymore.
Yeah.
And then you realize you're going to have to go on and push, but it's slightly too far back to the main road to work it out. Anyway, I ended up pushing my bike through what was basically like a desert of loose sand. And yeah, and I had I had a warm showers host lined up. And warm showers was something that I wanted to use. So the app where it lines you up with people that offer free accommodation to cyclists. And I'd not found it that easy to use in the States just because it's not, you know, you have to get lucky anywhere, but there's not that many users in the States. And, you know, it's kind of quite, it would be quite a coincidence if they happen to be where you needed to be. I'd had to cancel something a few days before because of the weather was so bad that I had to change my plans. And I had this couple that said they'd host me. And when I finally got there, having been through the sand and etc., and just some like very Trumpy areas that were kind of a little bit disconcerting, they were the sweetest people. The woman sent me a message saying, just ask anyone where Mike the Bikeman lives. And I was like, I like the sound of Mike the Bikeman. And their little house, they just had all of these bikes lined up outside and suspended from the trees and etc. And this woman, Nancy, she just said, come and sit down. She was sitting in her beautiful garden. She was like, I'll get you a drink. Let me show you my garden, etc. I was sleeping in an RV in their garden with like the windows open with this breeze playing on my face. It was so much better than this fancy hotel I'd been in the night before for my birthday. And Mike, Lanty had made us this dinner that was like this Ottolenghi style, like, I don't know, chicken burger, like patties with this giant couscous and aubergine and like vegetables and salad. Hooray. And then Mike took me to his local bar and we had some like beer and talked about politics. And they had like lobsters. They were cooking lobsters for like $11, which was $35 less than they'd been where
At
I've
the
been the night
hotel, yeah.
before. It just loved it. And it felt like I was actually in a real community. And they were such nice people. I just thought this day, which started off a little bit rubbish with the kind of you can't cycle here and the
It had everything.
and stuff, I just ended up like going to sleep in this RV just thinking I'm gonna miss this so much. I had that nostalgia because I already knew I was going to be in New York the next day. That was just like from here on in, I had I don't know, a sort of 60-kilometer cycle into Brooklyn. And I just felt really sad that it was over. Just like, it was like a really bittersweet day that I knew I'd done the last big cycle. But yeah, it was a real day of contrast. And it summed up to me what I found in America, that it's just such, even within a small place, it can be so diverse. You've got all of the very wealthy people and your Justin Timberlakes and, you know, your people with their Teslas going for their artisan French croissants. And then you've got this great cash only bar where they're doing like lobster for $11 and, you know, very drunk people around the pool table and stuff. I was just like, this is great. You know, I love this country.
And then you've got the big duck.
And the big duck, yes, of course. The ridiculousness of the American roadside attraction with the big duck, it was wonderful. And also the big duck had public toilets, which is another very rare thing in the States. And so I was very grateful to the big duck. I can't recommend it highly enough.
I'm so Googling the big duck. You have to send me big duck photos.
Send you a big duck. Trying to get my bike and the big duck in the same photo.
We'll remove the background and artificially put it in.
Yeah,
we'll get Eddie in there somehow.
It was great. I love that. Yeah, programmatic architecture in the States is so much fun. I wish in the UK we're just too boring for a big donut or a big duck.
Australia's pretty good for big stuff. We do big things. Big banana, the big merino, massive sheep, the big trout.
See, now I want to go to Australia and do a tour.
Well, I was actually thinking, like, yeah, what would your food tour of Australia be? That would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
I will warn you now. Much like America, there is a lot of stuff very far away. There's a lot of country here. Totally do it.
Yeah, and the kangaroos.
Kangaroos are definitely things you need to be concerned about. Mainly, I mean, it's not everywhere, but definitely in like the twilight hours and stuff. So, you know, if you're very early in the morning or very late in the evening, but generally, yeah, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You got to watch out for the drop bears. That's the biggest thing.
What?
Drop bears.
This feels like this feels like something that you're pulling my leg about.
No, have you not heard of drop bears? Oh no, they're like the vicious koalas. Oh my gosh, Google it. I'm not joking.
I feel
everyone
like
knows there's an animal in Australia that kills you. Before your Australia tour, you have just wrapped up your brand new book, which is on this brilliant tour through the US. Yeah. It's called Peach Street to Lobster Lane, Coast to Coast in Search of Real American Cuisine. If people want to seek it out and find it, I will be putting a link directly in the show notes. Listeners, much like our conversation here, it's just full of these beautiful travel anecdotes. You've got a mix of cycle touring mixed in, and then Felicity, just the way that you put in the bit of comedy as well. I absolutely love it. And we've got recipes to look forward to as well.
Yes, yeah, those dumplings. Yeah. If you make one thing from the book, make it dumplings. Or the biscuits, the American biscuits that are like really fluffy scones. I've got some killer southern biscuits in there with chocolate gravy, which is just, you look troubled at chocolate gravy.
Yeah. Although, have you had a Tim Tam Slam? That's something you've got to have in Australia as well. You've not had a Tim Tam Slam? Have you heard of a Tim Tam Slam?
No, I do know what a Tim Tam is, and I actually noticed that they sell them in.
They're cheaper in the UK than they are in Australia at the moment, which is quite bizarre. A Tim Tam Slam. Okay, I need to educate you and many listeners. Tim Tam is like probably Australia's premier chocolate biscuit. Very, very famous and very, very delicious. They come in many flavours now, but personally I just like classic original. They're sort of like a rectangular shape. They're almost like a penguin biscuit, I think.
Yeah,
They're not.
yeah.
They're much better. You bite one corner from one end and then the opposite corner. You have a hot, preferably coffee, but you could do this with tea. You dip one of the bitten corners into the tea and start sucking through the top of the other one until the biscuit is soft, and then you put it all in your mouth at once. And whilst you look at me in this disbelief, disgust laugh, it will be one of the best things you've ever tried.
Okay, I'm going to try it. I will let you know.
You can source these in the UK. I think Tesco sell them.
Yeah, I think I saw them in Waitrose, but I am just laughing because I'm wondering whether you've introduced any of your French neighbours to the Tim Tam Slam. Because
I have. My 83-year-old neighbour Maddo, I brought them a packet of Tim Tams and sort of looked at them with like this beautiful politeness. Oh, very nice. And then promptly served me up with like a Savoyard biscuit with my coffee, which is very French as well. So no. Anyway, when you do it, let me know.
Yeah. I'll keep you posted.
Sadly, Felicity, it's time to bring the show up to an end. I know we've spoken for ages and I could speak with you for days. 3 quick questions to wrap it all up with. The first one, you're a guest of the podcast. You get to go on our Seek Travel Ride music playlist. One song there picked from each guest of the show. What song are you picking to be the soundtrack to your adventures?
So this is quite hard just because I'm one of those people that doesn't listen to things when I'm riding because I don't think it's that safe. And I know people argue about this, but there were a couple of times in the Midwest when I had just had to put one earphone in because otherwise I would have gone mad. And one of the things that I did listen to was a lot of Woody Guthrie. And
I don't know him.
So he was an American folk singer, but he was quite political. And you should check him out. It's beautiful. And he did a song called My Land Is Your Land, I think is the official title. And it's a little bit controversial because I think that Native Americans have said, well, strictly speaking, it's our land. But it really summed up, I just think it's such a beautiful song. And that aside, I don't know, it's very atmospheric to me cycling through America listening to Woody Guthrie. And that one I don't know, he talks about, New York Island. And I don't know, it's very atmospheric. And I definitely would like to put that on the playlist. And also just as a sign, he was very socialist and politically active and aware. And I just think it's good to remind ourselves that America has that history.
Yeah. Oh, well, you are down. My Land Is Your Land by Woody Guthrie. Second last question. You're given a choice one day, Felicity Cloake. You can turn left, and if you do, you'll be on the most corrugated, bumpiest, roughest washboard road surface of your life. No respite for the entire day. Or you can turn right, and you will be on a road with a relentless headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
This is really tough because I really, really dislike rough surfaces. I'm not someone that ever wants to get into gravel biking. I love a lovely smooth piece of tarmac. But I just find headwinds so dispiriting. You couldn't even put on music to distract yourself because you cannot hear a thing. So I think I'm going to have to go for the corrugatedness just because I guess the corrugatedness could change up occasionally and be a different kind of bumpiness. And you keep your wits about you. It's just there's nothing worse than feeling like you're making no progress in a headwind, not being able to hear anything. It's got to be the corrugation, but I feel for my wrists.
Okay, team corrugations. It's funny, when I was talking with Al Humphreys, he was going to pick whatever other than the corrugations until he heard it was headwind. And then he quipped that the cruelest thing would be to have a tailwind on a corrugated road because you wouldn't even be able to take advantage of it. Good on you, Al. Okay, final question, Felicity. And I want you to finish this sentence for me. Writing sentences is something you do for a living, so I'm going to be interested to see what you come up with.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. The best thing about taking a bike adventure is?
The people you meet, I would say. You meet people open up to you when you're on a bike in a way that they just do not when you're in a car. You're very unthreatening. There's an easy opening question to be had. People just love to chat to you and you seem very approachable. I think you probably just seem like a very unthreatening person. And I love that. I love the conversations I have with people when I'm cycle touring. They make it for me.
Oh, I love it. And you're right. It is the people that you meet. I think there's a vulnerability when you travel by bike that drops that level of, there's a barrier that's not there. And there's a curiosity that's opened.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation starter that otherwise wouldn't happen with a stranger you'd otherwise not meet.
Yeah, and also I was, cycling through some really apparently quite rough areas of, say, LA, and my host was saying, "Oh, I wouldn't even drive through there," and I just thought, well, I'm probably hopelessly naive, but also I don't think people there saw me as any kind of like target because I was just some mad woman on a bike. It just put you're kind of out of the normal zone, and people just relate to you in that way. I just thought it's a great leveler, a bike, I would say.
I love it. Well, there's your answer. And listeners, I'm sure that you can really jibe with that as well. Oh my gosh, Felicity Cloake, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I knew it would be. Listeners, you know how I like to sneak food into every episode. I feel like I've been able to talk about food for the entire episode.
And get the Tim Tams in.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I've even introduced you to something. How have you gotten this far in life and not heard of a Tim Tam slam? I'm not sure. Or a drop bear.
I'm ashamed of it.
That's right. Learning has taken place. And from a legend who, the triple, 3 Cassoulets in 2 days, twice, and a magnum of champagne. I think that's awesome. Learning about your adventures in the US, the Big Duck. I cannot wait to read your brand new book. It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope one day to meet you somewhere in London, share a few food stories and have you show me where the best croissants are there. Although no, we need the best British breakfast in London. That's what I need.
Let's do it.
All is which to say, I'm looking forward to your Australian bike adventures, no pressure. And thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the show for Seek Travel Ride.
Oh, it's been such a privilege. Thank you.
Well, listeners, I don't know about you, but I'm actually a bit hungry now, having spoken to Felicity there. What an awesome chat I've been able to have with her, talking food the entire time, but also just getting some really cool little insights into her style of riding and also, those serendipitous moments from laughing about the Big Duck to figuring out what should I do if there's a twister to even just the idea of that first time you realize that when you're solo traveling that I don't have to make any decisions for anyone else today. I decide where I'm going. If I want to make the day start with a 35-kilometer ride before I have breakfast, that's totally okay. Those little things and the way that we tailor our bike rides, I really think they become such an individual choice. And I really think that's actually one of the best things about bike travel is there's no one right or wrong way. Everyone has their own style. And I really jibed with Felicity's style there, obviously for food reasons, but also just the curiosity that she rides with, the fact that she sought to go through the middle of America, the places that nobody really talks about, because she figured there would be stories there. And I'm sure when we read her book that we will be enamored with the stories that she will share with us as well. I've got a link in the podcast show notes to Felicity's book, and I highly encourage you to check it out. Thank you so much, Felicity, for such a fun chat. Listeners, if you are enjoying Seek Travel Ride and you would like to support the podcast, you can do so by hitting up my Buy Me a Coffee link. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/Seek Travel Ride. Buy me a few virtual coffees, but more importantly, let me know what it is that you love about the podcast and where are you going to be taking your next bike adventure. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Remember, if you're after bib shorts which genuinely keep you comfy for hours on your bike, do yourself a favour and check out Red White Apparel. They spent 10 years obsessing over one product and one product only, and it really shows. I ride in them, I love them, and I think you will too. Plus, by supporting them, you're also supporting Seek Travel Ride. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.